All right, we are live, and I apologize for the delay. Let me just check my mic. Yeah, I think we're good. Yeah, I would have done the intro tonight, but since we're behind the eight ball a little bit, I decided to skip the intro and just jump right in. I'll tell you why I was late. There's a reason. There's a reason why I was tardy. Well, first of all, it's not 6, it's 7, but I had to take a very important phone call from a family member tonight. So that generally takes precedence, right? Um, and then I was messing around with the quality of the stream because I had arranged the modem to be more hidden inside of the TV console. And I realized that that was actually interfering with the performance of the modem and the router. So I had to go deal with that as well. But anyway, I'm here, you're here, and thank you for being here. Uh, this won't be like a completely blown out version of 2024. I'm saving that for the members on this weekend, this Saturday, which is going to be, I believe, what the 6th. Is it the 6th? Anyway, this Saturday, the members will have a webinar where I'm going to go into 2024 with a fine-tooth comb. So you won't get that tonight, but you will get some highlights of what's happening. And there's enough for us to chew on tonight, just based on like what's going on with the Mercury retrogrades. Of course, there's the eclipse. And we have some major ingresses, a major ingress with Uranus going to Gemini. And of course, our friend Pluto takes up residence in Aquarius for a fairly long period of time, up to 2 degrees, then goes retrograde just in time for the election, where it's going to be at 29 Capricorn. And then it will go back into Aquarius on the 20th of November. So we're going to talk about some of those ingresses and the retrogrades. And of course, we'll touch on the eclipse. And I have some of those things charted off, so you'll be able to see them visually instead of just hearing about them and trying to put them together with oh yeah, there's this, that, or you're trying to write it down or whatever. So there's a visual aid, which will be. What do you guys think of this thumbnail that I'm using tonight? I have to admit, that's AI generated, right? I went into AI. I went into one of these AI picture things, and I said, I want Trump, I want a dragon, I want eclipse, and I had some other stuff. And there were a number of choices that it gave me, but I felt like this one was the most interesting in a lot of ways. And then what I did is it only gave me one image. And so I copied the image and then reversed it and then put them together, because we know that Trump is a Gemini, right? And it's just kind of an interesting effect, having these two sides. And the two sides look different, right? They look fairly different. And the dragon is there because it's the year of the dragon. And of course, the eclipse is a major player in the background and in the foreground of the year ahead. So there we go. There's a method to the madness. And I think for, I don't know, 15 seconds on AI. So I'm not completely and utterly opposed to AI, right? I mean, not to the point that I want AI to do everything, but there's no way that I could do that, right? There's no way that I could do that. And I might be able to hire somebody to do that, but I wouldn't be able to hire them on a moment's notice. And I wouldn't be opposed to hiring somebody to do an illustration. Bree has done great stuff, and I'll be working with her in the future. I don't need to have AI for everything that I do, but for a content creator who wants to do something that looks kind of unique and it's on the fly, there you go, right? And I didn't know what was going to come up. And of course, I'm the so-called creator. So I'm the one that put the two images together and created the two Trumps and the two dragons and the twin binary suns and the Gemini. So it's a beautiful partnership, us and AI. No, I'm not. Look, it's going to happen, right? It is going to happen. It is happening. It's been happening for quite a while. It's been happening ever since they turned the internet on. And they've had basically what's called self-recognition engines. And I know this because I was friends, I like to think I'm still a friend, with Charles Osman. And I've talked about Charles before on the show. Charles was a frequent guest of Art Bell's. And the reason he had Charles on is because Charles could talk about things like synthetic sentience and artificial intelligence and self-recognition engines. And he was talking about all this back in the 90s because Charles worked for DARPA. And there were things that Charles could not tell me about. He was under NDA. And he played in a very advanced world. So he was telling me all these things back in the 90s and hinting at what they were working on. Right. But the computing power since the 90s has just exploded exponentially. So it's not like AI is an overnight sensation. And really, who knows how long AI has been part of this world. Today I was shout out to John Levi and wishing him all the best because he's lost his faithful companion studio, his kitty, who's been around for over 20 years. And I was watching his latest video today, and you look at the buildings, right? These buildings that are just absolutely mind-boggling, and the time scale that they were supposedly built in, and the amount of people that were here to build the buildings, and how during a period of time when they should be looking new, they look all weathered and old, right? Like, how the fuck did they do that? Well, it's probably because there's some kind of AI that's associated with this world. Now, I don't know where it is, I don't know what it looks like, but there's some kind of intelligence engine that is connected to this world. Now, it is not separate from what we would call God. And I would say that this is kind of a radical thought, that God is the operator of AI or of a version of AI, right? I mean, I'm just throwing this out there, that they're not mutually exclusive. And when people talk about like prosperity consciousness, Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill stuff, Norman Vincent Peale, right? Those are all codes and keys to get into a version of the matrix in order for a person's reality to resemble something a bit more, elevated, civilized, right? Enlightened. And I think those things are there. One of the things that I've been mulling over is this whole 369 theory of Tesla. And I've been trying to relate it to astrology and relating it to the third sign, right? Which would be Pisces, the sixth sign, which would be Cancer, and then the ninth sign, which would be Virgo. But then you put it into house, and you're dealing with third house, which is Gemini, sixth house, which is Virgo, and ninth house, which is Sagittarius. And those are all mutable houses, right? I thought, oh, this is interesting. 369, right? It is the code of mutability. And if you look at 369 in terms of those houses, it makes complete sense, right? Because with the 3 or the third house, you get Gemini, so you get the idea, right? You get the blueprint. And then in the sixth house, or which would be Virgo, you get to work it out, right? You get to work it out. And then the ninth house in Sagittarius you get to judge your creations or your achievements, right? So the 369 is really interesting, but it also can go in reverse, 963, right? With Sagittarius or the ninth house being the inspiration. Well, this is the grand vision, in a better world in which everybody is able to get something that is useful and valuable and integral to their experience, right? That's the big picture with 9. 6 is you make it happen. You work on the big picture. And 3, right, which would be Gemini, is you tweak it. You tweak it, you make adjustments, right? So you can run this in either direction. You can go 369, 963, but there's something there. There is something there with those 3 houses in Tesla's 369 code. And if you can work with it and understand it, I think that what you're doing is you're tapping into part of the matrix, right? The creative, and everybody thinks that the matrix is this bad or we're moving into Aquarius, folks, right? And so these ideas that have been stratified and crystallized through Capricorn they're crumbling before our eyes, right? So we're all going to have to deal with an Aquarian world, and you can make a case that, well, gee, the Amish are Aquarian because they do everything within a group structure, but they don't have technology. They don't have all the things that Aquarius promises. You can make a case for that. I would also offer up that some Amish do have technology, right? It's not the same kind of technology that we indulge in, but they have technology. They build those little space heaters and shit, right? So it's not like they're devoid of the modern world, because clearly they're not, but they're not as rooted in the modern world, whatever that means, as we are, right? So you can make a case that the Amish are very Aquarian. So, well, that doesn't look anything like technology. Well, there's something to be said for their group and their ability to work amongst each other, right? There's not a lot of ego in Amish land. That's the opposite sign, Leo, right? So, yeah, maybe we can learn something from those people, but I don't think we're all going to run out and become Amish. We have too many of these tools at our disposal. So it's going to be very interesting as we sort through, and this is going to be, I think, the real kind of crux of our journey, is how do we understand something philosophical and profound, like an idea like God, right? The Most High, right? That everything begins and ends with. And if you look at certain parts of your life, honestly, if I had a conversation with each and every one of you, I bet you there's at least one moment in your life where you felt like it was touched by God, either through some miracle, through some kind of transformation or foundational change in your life that you yourself may not have been able to do on your own, right? So that part affirms that experience is real, right? It's real. And it's much, much bigger than any of us can comprehend. But then, as we step down and break it down a little bit, right? How did all this get created? And what else has been created in this world and any other world that we're not aware of, right? There has to be some kind of technology, whether it's sacred technology, right, or some kind of ancient technology. That, like, these things are part of our experience. And I feel like our journey through Pluto in Aquarius is going to be about figuring that out, right? It's going to be about figuring out how we play a role, a conscious role, in this realm of, I would say, evolutionary magic, right? And I do think that in the right, and again, famous last words, right? But I do think in the right hands with the right people, and especially the right group of people, AI could be very, very helpful. Like, really super helpful if you had parameters around it. Like, if you were in a community and you wanted to build an alternative community and you had at your disposal things like 3D printers and certain forms of technology and an AI engine that could help you solve problems, I mean, why wouldn't you use it, right? So now your community that has, I don't know, maybe 10 people, which is relatively small for a community if you want to produce food and let's say you want to go the Amish route, right? But you don't want to necessarily go the Amish route. If you have tools at your disposal that can help you solve problems quicker, faster, design things quicker, faster, you can potentiate your 10 people into 30 people, right? I mean, that's how this thing works. So what we're doing, and this was really the original idea around true technology, was that it would take less of us to do certain things that, say, thousands of people did a long, long time ago to create civilizations and worlds, right? So that's going to be part of our journey here. That's not to say that we're not going to go through some very intense stuff, which I'm going to kind of get into tonight. But just in terms of the technology that's at hand, that we could use theoretically, that we can make better use of it if we have the right parameters for it, it can be really beneficial for us, especially if we're cut off. Let's say the system itself breaks down. Not every piece of AI, which is really kind of machine learned self-recognition intelligence engine, is connected to some fucking mainframe in Bern, Switzerland, right? It doesn't always work that way. So you theoretically could have access to these tools and they can be incredibly helpful, very, very helpful, especially if you know the parameters of them. And then you hook it up to other pieces of technology, which we talked about a little bit, like 3D printing, graphene oxide, not the stuff that they actually shoot into the jibber jab, but it's an actual structure, right? Like Ian from Tim Pool talks about this a lot. And the idea, there is going to be a point in time where we will have a much more interactive relationship with the materials of this realm, right? That we'll recognize that they're part of us and it'll recognize that we're part of them. And so the plasticity of these tools will become much greater for us to use, right? And a lot of it's going to have to do with conscious awareness and the breaking down of our relationship with the physical world. And what do I mean by that? Well, a lot of times people are, and myself included, I'll throw myself in that camp. A lot of times we'll see ourselves as other, like we exist in this bubble, and then we have this world around us, right? Like on what was it? Yesterday we went to Walmart to what do we get at Walmart? I think some string to tie the duck or whatever, right? We got that and a few other things. So it's kind of like, okay, yeah, here I am. I'm in my bubble. I'm in my world, and then I'm in Walmart. But it's all part of a continuum, right? It's all part of even that, right? Even that world is part of a continuum. And what's happened is that at a certain point, many of us kind of aspired towards that kind of relationship with the world, right? That kind of conscious animism, that everything was connected. Everything was connected. The stars were connected. The sand on the beach was connected. The paramecium in the mud was, and it was all part of kind of one vast cosmic stew, right? And the idea a long time ago was, well, we're part of that family. We're part of that cosmic wheel of life, and everything, right? It's all part of us. There's no indistinction between us and it, right? And when you blow that up, it's like it's a really profound idea and thought, and then at that point nobody gets out of here alive, right? And then you realize that even though there may be some distinct differences on certain levels, that at the end of the day, you and Ben Shapiro are part of the same continuum, as crazy and as at times perhaps not so savory as that sounds. It's part of it, right? Or Dick Cheney or whomever. And then it's like, okay, well, we're part of this huge tapestry. But then what's happened over the last few years, and again, I don't blame people at all whatsoever for being in a bubble, is we've been thrown into this kind of, really intense binary world, this polarized world of good, bad, right, wrong, left, right, straight, gay, LGBTQ, super trans, you know what I mean? Like we've been thrown into this world where we have to make these decisions. And some of those decisions, by the way, are very important because in many ways, the structure of our society depends on our ability to define and discern what those things represent, right? And to actually say they're different, they're not the same. But the paradox, now here's where it gets strange, right? But the paradox is that we're all part of the same thing. And so what we've done, and I think that there's some value to this, is we've said no, right? We've been force fed all of this ideology, and it's supposed to just be good for you. Just take another spoon and take another spoon and, give up this and give up this and give up this and strip that and take away that. And then you're fucking nobody. Then you're nobody. You have no background, you have no culture, you have no foundation to stand on. All you are at that point is just a pile of goo, which is being stimulated to do and participate in the next thing. That's all you are, right? So people have made a stand and said, I am not that, I am not that, I am not that, I am not that, I am not that. I don't identify with that, I don't identify with that, and there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, it's actually quite healthy because in many ways we went way too far and we became way too plastic and mutable in our ability to just accept everything, right? So we have to find this path. And this is really the Aquarian path to understanding that we're individuals and we make choices which differentiate us from other people or other groups based on whatever, right? Based on our culture, our learned experience, our perception, our philosophy, right? We make those choices. And some of those choices are like, I don't want any part of this. That's insane. Yeah. Look at that book. They're reading that book. That book is available for my kid in junior high school. Not only that, but a bunch of other books like that. I don't want my kid to be part of that junior high school. So in fact, I'm taking my kid out of that junior high school so that they have a better sense, right, of not being programmed. These things are important. They're very important. And we're being tested on these things, right? We're being tested to stand up and say, well, I'm just not going to be, the AstroTurf welcome mat in front of your door to walk on. So we're getting much better at that, right? The backlash of that is that anything that is considered to be aberrant or different than that is satanic and evil, right? And we see this sometimes in the so-called truth community. It's like, okay, well, on Friday I had Mario on from Symbolic Studies. It was a great show, and we're talking about all these different kind of variations of Saturn and the polar age, and we're talking about the Crowley deck, and we're talking about some things where if you didn't have the ability to be a bit fluid, you could basically make a case that we're promoting something satanic. We weren't, right? We were just having an open discussion about symbols and how symbols affect us culturally and through time, and clearly through our time, and how they're demonized. And we got into a really interesting discussion about, the polar age, the lunar age, and the solar age. And we talked about how the celestial bodies associated with those ages become demonized, right? Like, so we played with this idea that the polar age was Saturn, like Saturn was the sun during the polar age. And then we have the end to everything, and we have this whole series of floods, the antediluvian world, the emergence of the moon, right? And then we talked about the symbolism of the moon, and then the lunar world that goes along with the moon, and the age of the goddess, and all that stuff, right? But then that gets demonized, and now we're in this solar age. And then we talked about this idea of, well, how will people historically look back on this time? Will they demonize the sun? And the answer to that is yes. Right? I mean, just look around. Global warming, climate change. The sun is doing all these things, right? And we talked about baby boomers and how the baby boomers are ruled by Leo, and Leo, of course, being a symbol of the sun, and them getting sort of the downdraft, as it were, culturally, right? So we're just talking about these things, and by no stretch at any point were we promoting Satan or what I would call satanic ideas. We were just looking at these symbols over and through time. That said, that as we move into the Aquarian age, which clearly we will be in 2024, that we're going to have to deal with certain things that are going to feel as if they are not a sin. I don't want to use the word sin, but there's what's the word I'm looking for? That there is going to be a sense that people are stepping out of, sort of the 40 square, right? The box, a heresy, right? We're going to have to deal with things in some ways that might feel heretical. Because if we're going to understand this idea of God in a new way, which we're going to have to, there's no two ways about this. We cannot divorce ourselves from the power and the idea and the mind of creation and the Most High and everything that goes along with that. We cannot divorce ourselves from that, right? That's where you get into the satanic part. And at the same time, we're going to need a new user's manual in order to connect with that and be a steward with that, and to have the group mind or the group focus so that each and every one of you is a luminary, right? 1,000 points of light. Remember that? Remember the 1,000 points of light? These guys ripped off all the good fucking magic. They ripped it all off and started using it and inverting it. This is exactly what happened when they talked about that. We are the real 1,000 points of light. They just took it and said, we're going to create a new world order around it. We're going to confiscate the language, right? And we're going to use it towards our end. And as we use it in the context that we're going to use it in, well, guess what? You're going to be sucked up and sucked in along with it. And you'll be one of our 1,000 points of light. You'll be one of the batteries that will bring on the Aeon or the New Age in their version of it. But we have our version of it. So this is what Pluto in Aquarius is going to bring to us. It's about understanding this technology of God in a new and different way, right? When we look at the end of Pluto and Capricorn, to me, those are all the secret keepers. And that goes along with the final degree of Capricorn, which we did a whole show on pretty much in the Sabian symbols, which is behind closed doors, a group of secret men, vote on the outcome of the world, basically, right? I'm paraphrasing that symbol. That is the final degree of Capricorn in the Sabian symbols. And so we're moving away from that. We're moving away from those people vested with the power to be the creators or the uncreators of this world. Right? We're moving away from that. And so the idea is then, if we're moving away from that, then what are we moving towards? And this is where I feel like it's going to be a real challenge for us to understand sort of these new technologies, whether they're, obvious technologies like AI or whatever else comes along, or unobvious technologies, more esoteric technologies, things like the 369 sequence from Tesla, right? Some of the older kind of more ancient technologies that we've been told to stay away from those things. Those don't go there. You don't want to go there. Well, why don't you want to go there? Well, because that's bad. That's of the devil. And I'm not telling you to go out and get a version of the Necronomicron and learn it by heart and play with it at home. That's not what I'm talking about. But in order for us to get through this period of time, we have to have a renewed compact and contract with this idea of God and the mind of God, and how we become better at accessing it and better stewards of accessing, because it's a lot of power, right? That's a lot of power. And not everybody gets to roll with that power. So that's the spiritual development, right? That is the spiritual side of where we are with Pluto and Aquarius. And just on, on a kind of a basic level, right? Like, how do you take care of other people? How do you, and this is a really interesting sort of thing we're being thrust into now as millions of people come into this country, right? What does it do? Literally, it gets you back into, I'm in the bubble. Like, I'm in the bubble, right? I'm in the bubble. I'm not going to allow anything to permeate my bubble. There's some truth to that. But on the other hand, I see it out here in the streets. There's a man and a woman and their kid, and they're out in front of Walmart and they're asking for money. Right. So what do you do with something like that? Well, there's an agency here in town. They can take care of you for that. Right. Or it's like, here's $20 or whatever these things are. And I'm not saying to be a bleeding heart, because we've been bleeding hearts, but we're going to have to find ways in order to demonstrate without being these kind of cookie cutout versions of compassion and empathy, right? Which in a lot of ways don't do anybody any good. It's just like, oh, well, I'll just be compassionate and empathic, and oh yeah, just take everything I own. No, that's not going to work, right? That model has failed. But there's something in the new model that does demand, as people, that we lift our gaze up, right? Because if we're going to be stewards of this world, if we are going to be the bridge between heaven and earth, we have to demonstrate it. And we have to demonstrate it in our daily lives. And we have to make a practice of it. That's just part of it. Why? Because with great power comes great responsibility. So you have to demonstrate responsibility. You have to demonstrate it. This is part of the deal. So what is your responsibility? Is your responsibility to your body? Well, I'd say yes. Because if you don't have a healthy body, you're fucked, right? That's number one. Number two, you have to have some spiritual practice. Something every day where you say, I am going to meet God today. I don't care what it is. It's got to be, it could be gardening. You could be going out to a hike in nature. It could be Tai Chi. It could be meditation. Whatever. You need to set that amount of time that day. It's like, this is where I meet God. And I am open. I am open to whatever the conversation is. And that conversation may not happen in that moment, but it can come back to you later. These are the things that we have to cultivate, right? Not only that, but we have been immersed in this virtual mystery school now through YouTube and all these channels and all these people for the last decade or so. There are things inside, right, of these worlds that are worth learning. They're worth learning, right? Whether it's the 369, the Tesla code, right? There are things that are worth learning. And so the idea is to be able to build all of this up, right? We're going to have to build all of this up. Again, with the idea that we're going to reconnect with this idea of God in a way that will be resonant for our time. Because I think God has shown up differently in different epochs and eras in different kinds of ways, right? This idea. So this is going to be really big with Pluto and Aquarius. It's like training wheels. We're just going to move into it for a while this year. And we saw what happened last year. It got fucking weird. As soon as Pluto went into Aquarius, guess who we got to get to become face to face with? And no, Dylan Mulvaney. He was the face of Pluto and Aquarius, right? I mean, it was like Bud Light was right there ready to go. And then they had Pride Month. And then about halfway through Pride Month, Pluto went into Capricorn. And we talked about this before, when Starbucks basically said, yeah, we're good. We're not doing this for the whole. It coincided with the Pluto retrograde back into Capricorn. You can see this stuff happen. It's being played out right before our eyes, right? So it's coming around again. And the high strange is coming. And Pluto and Aquarius is going to be really fucking interesting and really weird and at times scary, right? There are going to be things technologically that you're going to see that once you see them, you cannot unsee them. That's coming. right? A long time ago when I was at Gaia TV, it all started on my website a long time ago, but I did a show on Gaia TV called The Dark Aquarian Age. And everything that we're starting to experience now, I was talking about then. This was in 2013. I was talking about transhumanism. I was talking about artificial intelligence. I was talking about self-driving car. I mean, all the stuff that is now coming into our view and is being literally forced upon us, right? I was talking about it back then, and it was not very popular because at that time people were much more into the love and light version of Aquarius, right? That was their thing. It was like, oh yeah, we're just going to be all one big happy family, and I think that there's probably some truth to that somewhere down the line. I don't dispute that, right? But there's going to be some very interesting things that you're going to see that you're not going to be able to unsee, right? And there are going to be things that may terrify you as Pluto moves into Aquarius. But just keep in mind that for me, these technologies ultimately are egalitarian, especially in Aquarius, right? And things don't always go as planned. And they may have, it all lined up. Oh yeah, we got Tyson Chicken converting their chicken factories into bug factories. We got Bill Gates buying up all the land. We got this thing, hammered down, signed, sealed, delivered. Buick dealers are selling their dealerships because they don't want to sell electric cars and they're getting paid on, which is true, by the way. So are Cadillac dealers. It's all headed in that direction where you just look at it. But guess what? In Aquarius, things don't always go according to plan. That's the nature of the beast. In Aquarius, they don't always go according to plan. And that really is our ace, the ace up our sleeve, is that. Now we're moving, 2024 is an 8-year. It's very powerful, right? As above, so below. That's that 8, flip it on its side, and it's infinity. In Tarot, it is the strength card or the courage card. And the lion is tamed by innocence. And that's the story behind that card. It's a very powerful year. It's a fucking dragon year. So we got a dragon year. We got an 8-year, as above, so below. Flip it on its side. It's infinity. And guess what? You can tap into it. You can tap into it. This is all part of the field. It's all part of the field, right? The idea, again, this is part of what the Aquarian technology is about. So 2024, by the way, I'm just being upfront here. There's going to be some very dark patches to 2024. It's not going to be all fucking love and light. In fact, we're going to spend a lot of 2024 figuring out how we can stand on our own 2 feet, which is not always going to be love and lighty, right? This is going to be a very challenging year, super challenging, and we can talk about the eclipse if you want. I mean, it's a huge moment in time, right? And these eclipses have been, gathering their energy. In as much as we had the 2017 eclipse, we had the eclipse in October. Like, those eclipses just gather energy. They're all part of the same continuum, right? And so we're coming into a real big one in April, which we'll talk about, and all the things that go along with it. We have a lot of foreshadowing. We have predictive programming. We have the film that came out on Netflix. We have the film Civil War that's coming out at some point in time, written and directed by Alex Garland, right? These things are in the air. And they've been in the air for a while. Is it going to happen? Or are we going to lock and load? Is it going to be American versus American, American versus Chinese, American versus Somalian, American versus dislocated Muslim, American versus a prisoner or criminal from Venezuela, American versus RoboCop, right? Is all this going to go down? And there's the potential for it to go down. If you don't think that that it can go down, you better rethink that, right? I mean, that is really another part of the story for 2024 because we're dealing with Mars energy, big Mars energy, right? The nodes, the eclipse in April, and if I'm not mistaken, I think Mars might be in Aries around that time. I have to we'll look at it, right? So we're talking about big Mars energy, and the true node is like you need to understand how to operate as an independent being, right? Aries is independent. You need to understand that. You need to gather some strength here, whether they're tools or fit. Like I'm going back to the gym this week to get my body back. It's like at a certain age, man, if you don't stay up with your physical regimen, you're kind of fucked, right? So I went to the gym for about 2.5 years pretty consistently, and I took a few months off, and boy, I can really tell. So here we go, right? The true node is in Aries, and you have you as an I don't care where you are in the world. You can be in the United States, Australia, New Zealand, South America. The true node is in Aries, no matter where you are. So you better get your shit together, right? Physical, right? Get your physical shit together. Be able to respond to your environment. That is baseline, right? Aries is baseline. It's total baseline. Be able to respond to your environment. If whatever you need to do, however you need to roll, right? And you better be prepared to roll on any level. Because if you what is the saying? Tether your camel first and then trust in God. Because if you're not, then guess what happens? We got to be dependent upon somebody else. And not everybody's going to be helpful. In a time of major crisis, not everybody will be helpful. In a time of major crisis, people will circle the wagons and they will take care of themselves and their immediate family. By and large, that's what happens. And what are you going to do about it, right? This is how things have always been time immemorial. But you got to be prepared. You have to be prepared to the best of your ability. That's baseline. The Pluto and Aquarius stuff, we're dealing with that for what, like 16 years? So we're going to have time to work on like the big picture stuff, right? We're going to have time to understand like this magic and the technology that goes along with it, some of which we've forgotten, some of which is still around, we can't really understand, some of which will emerge, some of which is just inside of you. We'll have some time to figure that out. But the most important thing that you can do, starting right here, this day, 1/1/2024, is take care of yourself. You must take care of yourself. This is essential. And I know it sounds like kindergarten fucking spirituality. You got to take care of yourself. And I'd like to think that we have 4, 5, 6 months, or a year for you to get up to speed, right? So that your body's in good shape, that you're relatively limber, that you have the ability to maybe have a few native skills, right? Like that stuff is really important. And here's another thing that I'm going to share with you for 2024. Do not wake up every day thinking that it's just another day, right? This is not a year where it is business as usual. This is not a business as usual world. And I'm not here to promote any kind of trauma, but you've got to have situational awareness, right? This is a thing that's going to be really important. You need to take notes. You need to figure out like the patterns that are occurring in and around your own neighborhood. What are you seeing? What are you witnessing? Is there anything unusual, especially when you see it more than once, twice, 3 times? You see something, 3 or 4 times, it's like, okay, that's not a pattern anymore. That's something to be aware of, right? And then what do you do with that kind of knowledge? Well, you'll figure that out. Part of what Aries is about is knowing what to do when it happens. That's it, right? I have been spending a lot of time, since it's Aries, I've been spending a lot of time listening to accounts of battles and wars throughout history. And I started with a lot of stories from vets from Vietnam. And almost to the person, they would say they got their training, right? They got their training, and then they got dumped into some shit, and all of a sudden their training kicked in. And then they knew what to do. Most of them, right? I would say the majority, not everybody. So they knew what to do. It happened. That is Aries, right? That's it. You will not know what to do until the time comes to do it. And in order for you to do it successfully, you must be prepared. Must be prepared. So take this time, right? The beginning of the year, take a list, inventory. What do you need to do? Where are you short? Is it if you need more resources, figure it out. You don't always need money for resources. Sometimes you can trade things for resources. You have, let's say you're good at growing something, grow some food and trade for some things, right? Or be creative. Aries is resourceful. It is resourceful energy. You're out there kind of on patrol and you got to figure out how to make a lean-to with whatever's in your environment. That's Aries, right? So if you need resources or more resources, figure it out. You got to get healthy, figure it out. You got to get stronger, figure it out. If you want to learn some skills, learn something that's not going to take you 2 years to do, right? Figure it out. This is a great time to do this at the beginning of the year. Take stock, take inventory. What do you need? Here's the other part. Because we're dealing with Aries and then the Libra axis, and I've talked about this before, and to me, this is like really something I gotta practice this little preach here, because I just moved to this new neighborhood, right? And I gotta get to know these people. As much as I would like to just shut my door and just do my fucking thing as a 2-4 projector, I need to get to know these people. I don't need to become buddy with them, right? I don't need to have them come over and have coffee or tea all the time. But I got to get to know them, because the shit hits the fan. I have to have some semblance of a relationship with these people. It's incumbent upon me. I was just I haven't told my mother this, but there's this guy working on my truck just down the road here. I go, it's like, he's got his own little creative business, right? He's got like a metal shed and he can get one vehicle in there. Like he built that himself, right? And they work on trucks, small engines. It's not a huge garage. And you walk into their little office. It's one of those sheds that you buy from I don't know, Home Depot, right? And his wife is this, she sews and makes things. So they're selling like, pillows and stuffed animal toys, in the fucking shop where you're taking care of business. And the guy's wearing a piece on his side. I started talking to him. I said, this neighborhood was hit about 3 months ago. And I knew that. I knew it. Somebody told me. And by that time, we were too deep into the deal, right? So it was hit about 3 months ago, and it was probably about 35 cars. And I knew it was organized. Like when 35 cars get hit, it's fucking organized. They're not just kind of cruising around. And my sense was, well, this is probably some cartel action. That's what I thought. That's exactly what he told me. I said, oh yeah, cartel based out of San Antonio. That's who did it. I'm like, yeah, it feels about right. Right? It's like, okay, what do you got to do? You got to get to know fucking Dave down on the corner. Right? And basically, Dave said, yeah, I am empowered to deputize people. Right? In a time of crisis. I could, you're a sheriff? He can do that. You don't need to be a sheriff to deputize people, by the way. It's an interesting little factoid. But I just got to know Dave, right? It's like, oh, Dave's a guy to know. He's a guy to know. And my other neighbors probably aren't like Dave, but I got to get to know them. And why? Because I want to be able to, 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 Because some of these neighbors, you might get to know them, and you may just put a big X across that neighbor and say, this is the person that I have to keep an eye out for if the shit hits the fan. Not in a good way, right? Because you can't always pick your neighbors. And that's part of what you need to do. You're going to need to figure out who's around you. That's a very Aries kind of exercise. When I think of Aries, I think of pioneers, I think of scouts. We're dealing with Aries energy with that true node. This is the theme for the time, right? It is the theme for the time. And you have to get down and take care of yourself so you can be functional when this shit hits the fucking fan. And if the shit doesn't hit the fucking fan, even better, right? Even better. But I'm telling you, you have to be prepared. You just have to be prepared to the best of your ability. And some of the, and I've been listening to a lot of these YouTube videos about the Mongols and the Huns and these invading forces, and some of these psychological maneuvers around war and aggression are very powerful. They're very, very powerful, and they are absolutely meant to shock people, right? They're meant to shock people. So one of the things, this is just me, you don't have to do it, but I'm listening to this shit, right? I'm listening because in my brain, I have to be prepared for an experience that may be shocking. It's like, oh yeah, I can reference that. Now, I'm not looking for it to happen, but I need to be prepared for that. This is what we're dealing with in 2024. And then the idea is to become more empowered, right? That's the 8. The 8 is a big number, right? It is a big, big number. So you want to be able to increase your relationship with self-empowerment and the one and the same spiritual empowerment, right? We're working two tracks in order to do that. And I'm just telling you, April and the eclipse energy is huge. It's just huge. And just be prepared to the best of your ability, right? To the best of your ability. And there's so much that goes into a lot of this. And I don't have time. I don't have time for it. All right, why don't we get into, by the way, the chat has just been lighting up over here. And I've just been kind of, trying to stay focused on, a bit of stream of consciousness. And we're in Mercury retrograde. Yes. MJ Shreenard. Here we go. Let's put this up here. Those awful purple lights give me terrible migraines. Isn't that interesting? We talked about the purple light, the original purple light that was theoretically a byproduct of Saturn being the first sun, and now how they're recreating that, and that the whole George Floyd thing was the purple revolution, the purple color revolution, right? It's kind of, again, the inverted. It's all inverted. It's not the same purple light. It's a lesser light. Let's see what else we have here. I see Kathy in a rocking chair sporting an AK. She's got this little 22 Beretta. She's like, I still don't know how to use that. I'll take her to the range. We'll take her out there to the range. That'll happen. Here's what Jeff says. So many purple lights in Miami on every street light. It's a weird light, man, right? It's a very weird light. It's a recreation of the fallen light of Saturn. Robert. Let's see what we have here. Letro, get after your plan topics. All right. Have I talked enough? Have you guys heard enough? Stream of Consciousness, great show title. Are we good? All right. Plan topics. Thanks for keeping me on path, Steve. What have they done to car headlights too? I know, right? Let's bring up some of the goodies for 2024. Here we go. Where's my graphic? There is it. Yes, yes, yes. This is it. There we go. All right, this is not the entirety of 2024, but it is enough to have a bit of a roadmap here. Let's see. No, hold on. There we go. All right, let's do this. Let's do a little share screen. Okay, so these are just some major aspects. This is not the entirety of 2024. That's going to be part of the webinar on Saturday for members. So right now we're in a Mercury retrograde period, right? Or we have been. Let me go back here. Let's see. Are we out of it now? Let's just check. Let me double check my coordinates. Tomorrow, we go direct. It says the first here, but it's actually the second. So Mercury retrograde went by pretty quickly, right? I mean, that was a fucking, I mean, it lasted this amount of time, but it feels like it was just so much quicker than other Mercury retrogrades. Although I did feel some of the pain of that Mercury retrograde. So tomorrow, it'll be interesting because we got Mercury in Sagittarius. And it's going to be at going direct at 22 Sag. What is the Sabian symbol for that? Let's look at that. Okay. Okay. That's not what I want. Hold on. Here we go. So we're going to look at 22-23 Sagittarius. This is interesting. Very interesting symbol. Let me get back to this. So 22-11. So we're going to go 22-23 Sagittarius. Huh. So Sagittarius 22, a Chinese laundry, making use of one's special racial cultural background in order to survive and prosper in an alien environment. There are many life situations in which, because of one's ancestral or personal background, or their special interests, an individual finds themselves separated from the people in the midst of whom they have to live. Yet they often can use this background, a valuable foundation for smooth operation and acceptance by the alien environment without losing their own natural character. This second stage symbol stands in contrast to the one for the first stage. There is no longer a question of imitating the ways of a superior group, But instead of maintaining one's own integrity in situations which neither give value for nor favor what one basically is, what is asked here is self-containment in good humor. Okay, so I mean, theoretically, that's the weather, right, for 22 Sag through the Sabian symbols. It's an interesting interpretation. But then right after it, you have a group of immigrants as they fulfill the requirements of entrance into the new country. I think it's fascinating that both of these symbols show up in sequence, because when they did them, that's not how it went down, right? Like, she didn't know, she being Elsie Wheeler, didn't know that on that 3x5 card that Sagittarius 22 or 23 were going to be next to each other. No, they weren't, right? In the process, it was a double blind and the cards were not in sequence. And so what Mark Edmund Jones had to do was to go back and resequence everything. So here at 22 and 23, we have some very interesting symbols that are in a weird way connected to the time that we're in, right? Because a Chinese laundry would be indicative of immigrants who had already come here and started a business that's not a sexy business, but a business that they were good at and allowed them to build a life, a family, acquire assets, right? And at the same time, it's kind of a ubiquitous symbol, right? Like this whole idea, the Chinese live in a lot of people's heads. Like, and I'm not talking about Chinese Americans, although there is that in a way that is not very healthy on a racial level. That's a different story. But it's like China, 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 right? China, China, China. If you listen to Alex Jones, it's all China, right? Donald Trump, it's all China. So when we see this symbol of 22 Sag and a Chinese laundry, it not only is it reminiscent of the symbol itself, but kind of what's in the air, right? This idea that this country has an immense amount of power, and it is in the back of a lot of people's minds that it wants to flex that power outside of its own national borders, right? I mean, this is what people have been talking about for a very long time. By the way, it's interesting that tomorrow the Epstein list supposedly goes live on a Mercury Direct. And I don't know if you guys have heard this, but Hillary Clinton has taken down her social media profiles. You know what that means? That means Billy Boy's on that list. And she does not want anybody coming at her full force, right? So that's another, that is another part of this Mercury retrograde going direct story in Sagittarius, which theoretically tells the truth, right? That's the whole idea with Mercury and Sagittarius. There may be some mythologizing, or there may be some overinflation of the truth. This is what Sagittarius does. But by and large, that's what it's supposed to do. Let's go to 23. Oh, look at this. A group of immigrants as they fulfill requirements of entrance into the new country, consciously accepting the ways of a new stage of experience and readiness for the opportunities it will present. Very interesting, right? So now we're talking about immigration. What is going to happen here as Mercury goes direct? And are we going to see a major backlash against what's been happening, right? Is there going to be all of a sudden a radical reprisal of the process that we have been dumped into with these open borders? Or will this, at Sagittarius 23, as Mercury goes direct, will it become a contrasting image? And who was it was Marianne Williamson. She was on with Tim Pool. Poor Marianne Williamson. She tries to do the right thing, right? She's got that that sort of, that golden liberal heart, and she's got those sort of baked in the you know baked in the lead kind of principles that she picked up on in the 60s, and then she's added some sort of spiritual filigree to them, but doesn't let go of them. But at the same time, she's also a seeker, right? And part of her understands that there is a truth to situations that she may not always be aware of. So she's somebody that's trying to work through her programming, which she believes is based on these universal principles of love and empathy, compassion. But so a reason I'm bringing this up is because they got to a pretty intense discussion around this on Tim Pool, which I really don't watch, but I wanted to see the Marianne Williamson thing because she's one of the few liberals that has come on any of these shows to talk about or defend her position. So I wanted to see what that was like, right? So here we go. What is going to happen over the next 48 hours, 72 hours, as it relates to these two symbols, right? A Chinese laundry, because we know what that represents. It represents the setting up of a culture in a new land and trying to find something meaningful to do so that they can do it and make a living out of it that doesn't necessarily force them to participate in the main. Like being a fucking laundry is pretty easy, right? You take it in, starch, no starch, right? No tiki, no washi, that sort of thing. You get it done, boom, you have a transaction. You don't need to know like how to leverage principle or position and use language in order to do that, right? Like at that level, it's very fundamental. But at the same time, it represents an echo of a period of time when a culture did come to this country and they didn't have a lot of tech savvy skills in terms of language, and they found a way to connect, come in, and build a life and build a business. That's part of it, right? So there's this image or this echo of a time, and you may get some of this over the next 48 hours from a collective position where people will say, well, we have to come up with things for them to do. They just can't, float around from sanctuary city to sanctuary city, right? So I feel like what we're going to see here with Mercury going direct and these two Sabian symbols back to back is you're going to see a bit of a sea change with this whole immigration thing, that people are going to make more of a case for either legal immigration or at the very least trying to find a way to stem the tide. And I think that this will ultimately wind up being bipartisan because we're seeing the net effect of what's happening in quote unquote liberal or progressive cities and states, and they can't handle it, right? They cannot handle it. So instead of having more fairy tale discussions around this, right? I feel like just look at these 2 degrees. This is exactly where Mercury is going direct, and I feel like there's going to be much more stringent talk about this whole process. I think there is another Supreme Court. I think the DOJ went to the Supreme Court against the state of Texas because the state of Texas is by the way, Greg Abbott is fucking lame, but they're trying to keep the Rio Grande partitioned in the water, right? And what happened is that I believe the State Department lost their case. So now the DOJ is going to the Supreme Court. Right? So this is all Sagittarian language. This is all Sagittarian talk. Right? This is the language of law. And it'll be very interesting to see what comes out of it. I mean, it could be the other side of this, right? It'd be like, oh, okay, we're going to give everybody amnesty. But you could hear that conversation in the next 48 hours. I would not be surprised if that happened. We're going to give everybody amnesty. And everybody that's here now is going to get this, it's going to get that, because they want these people on the voter rolls. That's a big part of it. It's not the only part, but it's a big part of it. So as Mercury goes direct, it goes direct in Sagittarius at these 2 degrees. Immigration law, immigrants, the immigrant song, Led Zeppelin. No, I'm just kidding about that one. These are going to be big talking points. Very, very, very big talking points. And it'll be good. It'll be good because we'll be having a discussion, right? And will there be a ruling where people will be sent back? I don't know the answer to that. But I do know that it is definitely going to be talked about and might even creep up into the headlines or the lead story on mainstream news media. You know, James O'Keefe has been spending a lot of time in the Arizona area trying, and he's getting all of these people who are whistleblowers. Like, where are they coming from? You know, who's taking them from point A to point B? He's like loaded up on the backstory. And a lot of people are making a shitload of money off of this. I mean, that's another part of this that isn't really talked about, is how much money is being made, right? So it's going to be very interesting as Mercury goes direct here under these 2 degrees of Sagittarius. Okay. All right. So here we go. We got a Mercury retrograde happening during the eclipse. That is a fucking humdinger. Am I right? Hell yeah. 23 days. 23 days of a Mercury retrograde during the Great American Eclipse. Can we just ponder that for a moment? In Aries, remember, I've been talking about how to be prepared. This is your target date right here. April 1st to April 24th. January, February, March. You have 3 months. 3 months to kind of get your shit together to the best of your ability. And the Mercury retrograde will be very interesting. Like, just layer that on top of what's going on with the eclipse. Remember, this eclipse comes up from Mexico through the hill country, which is where I am, and then veers right and it eventually ends up in Nova Scotia. So it creates a giant X pattern and an aleph from the eclipse in October, and it runs parallel the New Madrid fault line. And we had the map where the 2017 eclipse, there's that, I think it's part of the Cascadian subduction zone where there's a crack in the mantle that basically runs from Washington State to about South Dakota, right at the end of South Dakota. And so that 2017 eclipse ran along, not exactly, but it ran in parallel with that line. And then we have this other eclipse running in parallel with the New Madrid fault line, which is a fault, right? That's where the Mississippi River is. So keep your eyes on the Mississippi River, keep your eyes on water levels related to the Mississippi, you know, prior to the eclipse, because people are they're already talking about it. You'll hear more about it the closer we get. So here we go. Starts off in a mutable sign, and then it resolves itself in a mutable sign. So with Mercury retrograde, mutability is key, right? It is key to everything. So, you know, we have the ability to change course, right? To, you know, kind of reroute ourselves with a Mercury retrograde in a mutable sign. And with Sagittarius, all we have to do is realign our philosophical awareness, realign the big picture. That part, I think, on a personal level, pretty easy. We'll see how this operates in the realm of law starting on Tuesday and Wednesday. This is different, right? Because now we're in cardinal energy. So we have an eclipse coming in on cardinal energy. We have a retrograde, which isn't always great with cardinal energy, right? Because with cardinal energy, you're starting something, you're initiating. And with a retrograde, there's misfires. You know, so there's like, you know, especially April 1st, like, you know, April Fool's Day, plan for, and any plans like will go awry. And you might even see April Fool's jokes I hate to use this word, blow up in people's faces during that period of time. And something that isn't a joke could be, oh, right, this is an April Fool's joke, isn't it? No, it's not. No, it's not. This is fucking real, right? Because we're headed into inversion. We know we'll be in inversion world because of the Pluto ingress into Aquarius, which starts on January 2nd. So it goes to 2 degrees, to May 2nd, and then it retrogrades on May 3rd. It goes all the way to Capricorn, back to Capricorn 29 on September 2nd, and then it goes direct on October 12th, and then of course there's the ingress to Aqua, the final one on 11/20. Right. And then there we have the election with Pluto and Capricorn, the last election that we'll have with Pluto and Capricorn. And so that's a big election. And we're going to have it. A lot of people think we're not going to have it. We're going to have it. It will be the last election as we know it. I don't know what will happen after that election. I don't know what America is going to look like 4 years after that election. But it's the last one that will be, and even now you can kind of see where, like, the retrograde stuff with the ballots, it's like, oh, Trump's off that ballot. That's all Sagittarian law, right? No, he's not. He's not off the ballot. And what's happened is that the people, I believe it's the person from either Colorado or Maine, I forget which one, they're in big trouble now, right? The Secretary of State who said we're going to take him off the ballot, like, they're in deep shit. They're in really deep shit. So you can see the retrograde just work from that angle. It's like, yeah, nope, sorry, that's not going to work. Right? But this is way different. This is very different. And, so we're dealing with cardinal energy, and we're dealing with the ingress, which starts on January 2nd into Aquarius. Everything inverts. So this is the application of will, but it doesn't go as expected. And again, that isn't always a bad thing, especially if we're dealing with like dominant paradigms, dominant programs, dominant programming. It's like, well, look at that. That blew up. Wow, isn't that interesting? That didn't go the way they thought it would go. So it's not always set in stone and all doom and gloom and bad. But during that time with this retrograde, for me, how I would operate with that is I would operate with just checking how prepared you are, right? That is like everything that goes along with the retrograde would be any of the prefixes, like, reroute, reformat, realign, reinspect, review, like all of those things become really important during retrogrades. Anything with a re-prefix is perfectly fine during a Mercury retrograde. So with this, right, I'd be looking at this Mercury retrograde as, well, let me take stock of everything and make sure the things that I have are in working order, right? That's a really big part. Now, I could make a case here because we're dealing with the eclipse in Aries. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Chiron will be close to the Chiron return in the U.S. Chiron return. Let me just see this. Where is that? April? Yep. So during that retrograde, on the 19th, right, during that retrograde, Chiron will be at 20 degrees. And Chiron at 20 degrees is the U.S. Chiron at Aries 20, right? So the U.S. is going through its Chiron return. at that time. Remember, 1776, right? Chiron and Aries, call to arms. You have your Declaration of Independence, right? And then after that, you have the Constitution, the right to bear arms. So if we look at this, right in here, we've got Chiron return. We have a Mercury retrograde in Aries, which is a call to arms. And we have the eclipse. Now, the question is here, would there be an event at that time or during that time that would precipitate trying to disarm the public? Because that's what I see the Chiron return. And that's what I've seen the Chiron return for the U.S. for a long time, right? For a long time. Okay, do we want to do something? What is it? What do we want to do? Do we want to shut down the armories or whatever? It doesn't always have to be constitutional law, but this is really a very interesting time when we get into that discussion, especially with the Chiron return, 20 degrees Aries, Mercury retrograde, the solar eclipse in Aries. Honestly, with that eclipse, or this period of time, if you want my advice would be to lay low. That would be my advice. Lay low. You don't have to be afraid. You don't have to dig a shelter in your backyard, but I would lay low. That's just my feeling about this time. When I looked at, doing an event in October here, which we did, which was great. And I thought about, well, maybe we'll do an event. Should I do an event in April since I'm here? And the immediate thing that came to mind was, fuck no. I want no part of running an event here in April because I think there's going to be too much going on. That's my sense. So, yeah, there's going to be a lot happening. But I would say with that Mercury retrograde and everything else going on, lay low. You don't have to run and hide, but I would definitely kind of understand my surroundings. Now, again, cardinal energy that fails to initiate, but succeeds in getting you to think about whether or not you are prepared, right? That's the checklist. Let's go through this. Let's review everything. Next Mercury retrograde period, August 4th to August 27th. So we're in fixed, right? Now we're in a fixed phase. So we have mutable here, starts mutable, cardinal, and then fixed. And then we go back to mutable, right? Mutable, cardinal, fixed, mutable. So these are the cycles for the retrograde. And we end the year, though, in a lot of ways, the way we started it, right, with ultimately mutability. So here we go, fixed sign, right? Mercury, this is the lead up to the election. So, there's always been a lot of talk about October surprise, right? It's not October surprise this year. It's August surprise. It is going to be August surprise. And let me just look at my coordinates here. Okay, so Mercury starts off mutable, and then it ends in fixed, right? It ends in fixed. So we start mutable, and it ends in fixed. And it's going to be at 4 degrees Virgo on the 5th of August. The sun, of course, will be in fixed energy. Venus at that time, Mercury retrograde, will be 29 Leo. So Venus will be fixed. And Mars will be in Gemini. That period of August, we're like the 14th of August just file this date away. The 14th of August, Mercury's at 0 Virgo retrograde. Venus is Virgo, 13 degrees, 12 degrees. And there is about as close as an exact conjunction of Mars and Jupiter on that day. That's going to be on the 15th, 14th of August. Moon in Sag, Sun in Leo, 20 degrees, 21 degrees. And you've got, we'll talk about Jupiter and Gemini. That's part of this discussion. So, yeah, that Mercury retrograde starts in a mutable sign, and it resolves itself on the 29th of August. It says 25th here. Say 25th. 27th. 27th. Let me just see here. Well, officially, it doesn't go direct until the 28th. But it stations. Looks like it stations on the 27th. But according to the ephemeris, it doesn't go exactly direct until the 29th. So we are talking about mutable to fixed, right? And again, we're coming really close to the so-called election. So Mercury retrograde in a mutable sign could be very interesting, right? And then it resolves itself in this fixed sign. So how do you reconcile that? Well, whatever happens as a result of the retrograde is kind of baked at that point, right? It's like it's fixed. There's no changing it. If there is again, I'm going to tie this to the presidential election. If there's a president, if there's a candidate, this whole candidate thing is going to get weird. But if there's a candidate during that time and they fuck up during this mutable phase of Virgo retrograde and they admit that they made a mistake, which hardly anybody does anymore, it will have great consequences and positive consequences. Like this is one of those retrogrades where it looks like it could really fuck somebody up, but they're kind of able to sort of juggle it, admit where they were wrong, and actually kind of come out on top. That's if they can. Now, sometimes that can actually be a political strategy where people will do that. Like they will throw something out there that might be slightly egregious, but they'll do it on purpose. So it makes them look more palatable, more human. And like, wow, he admitted that, or she admitted that. Wow, look at that. Yeah, they've got my vote, right? So that's the other side of it. Because with retrograde, sometimes retrogrades can be very sneaky, and especially in the political realm, but they can backfire too. Like if somebody wants to use that as a strategy, it might work, but again, it could completely backfire. So this is, to me, August is the August surprise. It's not October surprise. It's August surprise. And then the next retrograde happens on November 25th. And that retrograde starts off, I believe Thanksgiving is on the 21st that year. Is it the last Thursday? So maybe it's the 28th. So Mercury is definitely in Sagittarius, and it's at 22 Sag, which is interesting because that's where it goes direct, right? Like Mercury goes direct at the same degree it goes retrograde in November. And it's that Chinese laundry and the immigration thing. So we start the year with that symbol in that degree, and we end the year with that symbol and that degree triggering the Mercury retro, the final Mercury retrograde of the year. And then it resolves itself at 15 or on 15 December. And the degree of Mercury on 15 December is 6. 6 Sagittarius. What is that on the Sabian symbols? Six Sagittarius. A game of cricket. It's an interesting symbol. The development of skill in group situations, testing collective goals. Rudier talks about group solidarity here. I tend to think of it more as a symbol of colonialism, right? That's what I think of it as. Anyway, that is the last Mercury retrograde of the year, and it starts in mutable and ends in mutable, right? So we have mutable. Oops, let me go back. View. Okay, let's do this. So starts immutable and then ends immutable. And then here we have cardinal, cardinal. Here we have mutable fixed. Here we have mutable, mutable. So mutability tends to be a larger theme this year. And that brings us to Jupiter and Gemini, which is the kind of the ultimate in mutability, right? We have Jupiter, which again, if you're playing with this idea of the polar age, the lunar age, the solar age. So what comes after the solar age? Well, in the movie 2010, which was the sequel to 2001, Jupiter becomes the second sun in the solar system, right? It's kind of an interesting discussion to have. So if we go from polar to lunar to solar, what would be the next age? Would it be bipolar? I think we might be there, right? Anytime you talk about Jupiter, especially in Gemini, you're talking about bipolarity. So talk about, multiple models of reality. Jupiter and Gemini, especially happening in the month of Gemini, right? I think at that point in time, Jupiter, the sun is at what, 4? 4 Gemini. So we have a Sun Jupiter conjunction, which is really the model of the movie 2020, because in the movie 2020, our own sun is still in the sky, and then there's that image at the end where Jupiter becomes the second sun, right? And 2010 is actually a really good movie. Do not sleep on that movie. One of my favorite actors, Roy Scheider, is in that movie. So we have the sun in Gemini and Jupiter in Gemini conjuncting together, these two twin suns, right? And it's kind of, and I threw the 2 Trumps up there because, of course, Trump is a Gemini. And is this going to be, the return of Trump in 2024 with Jupiter and Gemini? I mean, hello, do the math. Whatever your thoughts are on Trump, and I have a wide array of thoughts on Trump. Some of them range from, being this kind of archetypal disruptor, right? Like he is really, sort of this version of Zeus Hermes in a lot of ways because of that conjunction with Uranus. And we think of Uranus as kind of lightning and thunder and this electricity and this revolutionary and explosive force that comes along with Uranus. And then the conjunction with the sun, which again would be like Hermes, like, so he's like this Zeus Hermes character, and he's disruptive. And part of his role historically has been to wake people up out of their slumber. Some people think that we might have been better off if Hillary Clinton had won. I've had that thought. I've entertained that thought. Why? Because it would have been much easier to push back and play defense with Hillary Clinton by going on the offense, right? And it's exactly what they did with Trump. They put Trump on his heels the entire time. They went on the offensive. So, but at the same time, he became this disruptive force, for better or worse, where people are wake. And I think with Trump, my feeling is more agnostic than, because he did some shit that's not good. I'm sorry. Like, he just brought BlackRock right into the United States government and put him right between the Treasury and the Federal Reserve. Not a fan. Not a fan. And it might go down a little bit better if he could have had a little more hubris about the vaccines. A little bit more hubris. Like, I did the best I could during that time. The nation was really under a lot of strain, and I did the very best I could for the people, and to try to keep as many businesses and lives as open as possible. I hope that the vaccine was as effective and as powerful as we thought it could be. I mean, he could have taken that route and people would have been okay with it, right? But, the constant victory laps, I know it's a little Mercury retrograde, but the constant victory laps and the doubling down, the tripling down, the quadrupling down, please just stop. You're basically insulting a bunch of people and their intelligence. Just say, hey, I did the best I could at the time. It was a very tough time for the country, and I hope we never have to go through it again. And if you ever elect me again, I promise you'll never go through it again. I mean, that would have been the best thing to do. But some people are incapable of that, right? Anyway, but this could be Trump's year. Jupiter in Gemini. He's a Gemini. He's coming up for re-election. And what is it? November, what? First Thursday? Is that it? First Thursday. Sun's at 20 degrees. I'm sorry, Jupiter's at 20 degrees retrograde. It's on his sun. To me, that would be a symbol of him returning, being president again, against all odds, right? And again, I'm not here to champion a Trump presidency, because you're going to see the other side of Trump, and if he gets elected, and based on this retrograde motion, I can easily see that. He's got Jupiter on his sun. What's it off by about 3 degrees? Jupiter, Sun, you're transiting Jupiter on his sun. Kind of a bit of a slam dunk there, right? He'll be very different. Be very different. Yeah, just saying, right? Just saying. We also have this Mars Cancer, Mars Leo cycle. I'm not going to get into it tonight, but I am going to talk at length about it on the webinar on Sunday. I got to save something, right? I can't just throw everything out there. Jupiter and Gemini. This whole idea of the two suns being together on that day, fascinating. And I just think we're going to see so many different versions of reality. And then you throw in Pluto and Aquarius, right? Let's see. Let's go back to, is it May 25th? Let's see. Where's my May 26th? So we will get some Jupiter, some Pluto and Aquarius during that time. Let's look at that. Yeah, so Pluto is retrograde, and we've got the sun will be at 5 Gemini. Jupiter will be at 0 Gemini on the 26th. And then Pluto will be at 1 Aquarius. So we're going to have a Pluto-Jupiter trine with Pluto retro. It's fucking wacky. That's wacky. That's like serious high strange. Mars conjunct Chiron during that time too. Yep. Mm-hmm. I just, when I try to wrap my head around Pluto trining Jupiter, especially Jupiter at 0 Gemini, Pluto at 1 Aquarius, I just get just weird, strange, like detached, goofy. Okay, here's what I think. I think we're going to get some kind of insight into a parallel sun or a parallel world. And I think it's going to start to come out around this time in May. So are we talking Nibiru? I don't know. Are we talking another version of Earth that's in a parallel orbit with us, which I've thought about for a long time? Something very unusual happens here, and we become aware of more than one world. This is on the heels of the eclipse, right? Also, when we get into, Gemini territory, we do get into splitting as well. And, are we going to be split into various states? Are we going to get more balkanization? It's going to be just really weird. By the way, Neptune, 29 degrees, Pisces, in May of 2024. Final degree of the zodiac. Like something comes, it's like it's getting ready to finally come to an end. And then it goes retrograde. So Neptune goes retrograde in July, and it goes, then we're in this long dance again with Neptune and Pisces, and not resolving itself until the end of 2025, beginning of 2026. So it's kind of like deliverance, no deliverance. It's like we're kind of back where we were again. This is going to be a very unusual year. To me, the story is this Sun conjunction with Jupiter and Gemini, and then that weird trine with Pluto. I think we become aware of different reality. Literally, we become aware of a different reality, a different world. And that's in the postscript of the eclipse. Very, very intense time. Super intense time. All right, we got these ingresses. So January 22nd, here we go. Crank it back up. Right? That's another one of those days. We got Pluto at 0. Pluto at 0 Aqua. Right? Pluto at 0 Aqua. Coming in and hitting the Sun in Aquarius at 22, it goes 0 degrees on the 21st. So this is interesting. It's based on this degree, Pluto and the Sun enter Aquarius together. Just like how on the 26th of May, give or take a few degrees, Jupiter and Gemini and the Sun enter together. So there's this interesting story about the Sun this year with these ingresses, and how the ingress is potentiated by the Sun, right? It becomes bigger, more intense, more powerful. In a lot of ways, it sets the stage, right, for the entire ingress to come. We're not that far off. We're 21 days away from that. Circle January 22nd on your computer or on your calendar. And then it stays in Aquarius until the 2nd of May. And then at 2 degrees, it begins its retrograde the next day on May 3rd, right here. And it goes back into Capricorn on the 29th, or I'm sorry, at 29 degrees on September 2nd. And that's it. It goes direct on October 12th. And then a little over 2 months after that, it goes into Aquarius, and that's it. November 20th. And along the way, we will have the election. We will have the election. It is going to happen. And it is going to be fucking weird. Just trust me on that. But it'll be the last election that we know and will experience in this way. It's it. And if it doesn't happen, I wouldn't be surprised, but I believe it will. If Pluto was retrograde, I would think that it would be a big issue. If Pluto was in Aquarius, I don't think it would happen. But remember, that degree of Capricorn, and we talked about this 2 weeks ago, is the degree where the fate of the world is basically decided upon by a group of people that are occulted, hidden, and are essentially voting on the direction of things to come. That's that degree. And that's where Mars was on election night in 2016. Mars is at 29 Capricorn. And that's what got Trump over the hump, right? And then the next day, which was, I think, was it 9/12, 11/12? I mean, 11/10. Mars is in Aquarius, and it initiated the revolution, the 2-year revolutionary cycle that Trump had to deal with. Anyway, that's all prior history. It's going to be a fucking weird year, but it's going to be really powerful. Like when you look at January 22nd and the Sun and Pluto coming together in May on the 26th, and the Sun in June, this is when we get a much bigger sense. We get a sense that we're much smaller in a lot of ways than we ever thought we were, right? Like just big shit starts to happen. But on the other hand, as we rise to the occasion, we understand that we're bigger than we thought we were. This 2024 is huge. It is a huge year. It's kind of an all-in year, right? It's like power play. Because we go into 2025, that is a 9-year. In 2025, we get to the end of the cycle of Neptune and Saturn, and we're moving into that Neptune and Aries. So 2029 is really like this. 2028 is not the end. Sorry, 2024 is not the end. 2025 is the end of a very significant cycle. And 2026 is the new, right? Neptune's in Aries, Saturn's in Aries. Something new, for better or worse, is coming. For better or worse, it's coming. 2026. So 2025 is cycling out of the old. It is done. It is, the suspension of time, everything that has kind of gone. Like 2024 is not that year, right? 2024 is amplification and power and all in and flex, right? And the battle of, heaven and earth, right? Like, earth in this case maybe being fallen in some ways, right? It's like the quest to bring these two worlds together. That's what 2024 is about. And 2025 is letting go. And who knows what that's going to look like. Really, I mean, it could be like being a very somber moment. We could theoretically we could witness a huge amount of loss of life in 2024. That would not be out of the question. And 2025 could be an absolute mourning. And 2026 would be the initiation of the new, right? Because we're in that one vibration. So, buckle up. Buckle up, buttercups. It's going to be a very powerful year. I like dragon years. I've always liked dragon years. The last, every time there's been a dragon year, I've seen those years as being very pivotal. Like 2000 was a dragon year, if I'm not mistaken. Right? 2000, 2012, and then 2024. So 2012 was a dragon year too. Think about those years. 2000, we had, the whole end of the millennium thing. Right? Y2K. I mean, 2000 was a heavy year. It was basically the decline of the .com market. You had the arrival of Bush and the neocons. Like 2000 was a heavy fucking year. And then 2012 for, a lot of things happened in 2012. And, I think something did fundamentally change in 2012. That we're not running on the same timeline. And all the Mandela stuff, I think, points towards that. Like just real high strange. So those are dragon years. Those are really big years. And let's see, so Obama was elected in 2008, right? So 2012 was an election year for Obama as well. And here we go again. 2024, 12 years later, another election year cycle. Not for the faint of heart, but if you're up for it, man, it's going to be a wild ride. And you're going to learn a lot about empowerment. You're going to learn a lot about how to take care of yourself. You're going to learn a lot about witnessing how fucking weird the cosmos is. And I'm just, pulling some pieces together. To me, the Sun-Pluto conjunction and the Sun-Jupiter conjunction is huge. Huge. And I feel like we become aware of another world this year. And who knows? Maybe it's some kind of Project Bluebeam, Tucker Carlson, disclosure trip with Gemini. Does it really matter? My screen just went away. That's odd. Like, does it really matter? To some extent, I guess maybe. But maybe not. Maybe they disclose something that's fake, but is simultaneously real at the same time. The real hidden in plain sight. That would be interesting. All right, when did we start? Started around 7. It's 8, it's 9 o'clock. All right. So I'm going to shut her down tonight. And I will be back tomorrow for the astro weather, which is why I didn't look at the chart at the moment, because we'll do the astro weather tomorrow. And I'm going to jump into 15 minutes of flame over on Boxcast. I'm meeting with my web guy who is building the new 15 minutes of flame site. That meeting takes place on Thursday. So hopefully by next week, we'll have that back up again. And when I go back in on 15 minutes of flame, it'll be on the website. It'll be on Boxcast. It'll be on Rumble. I may try to do it on Twitter. I may try to do it on Instagram. Try to stretch out the network as much as possible. Why not? Right? Let's let it rip here in 2024. Go big or go home. Except during that Mercury retrograde period. I'd say lay low a little bit. The one in April, by the way. All right. Thank you for joining the show. Don't forget about my friend Chris at True Hemp Science. Let me throw the banner up here. All you got to do is spend $100 or more at truehempscience.com, and you'll get some of the best CBD products on the internet, bar none. And type in 15 mins and you'll get free product, free goodies with your order. $150 more, get you free shipping, and there's always a 30-day money-back guarantee. Start your Gregorian year off right and take care of your body. CBD is one of the best things that you can add to your supplement regime. Anything else? Oh, I am doing readings, so feel free. RobertPhoenix.com. The link is in the description. And if you feel like it, buy me a cup of coffee. Thank you for being here, mods. Once again, thank you for your participation and keeping everything on the straight and narrow. Thanks for your patience tonight, for allowing me an extra hour's worth of time. And don't lose sight of the fact that you matter. You matter. You count. In your own story, you matter. And you may matter more in other people's stories than you understand. And this is the year to make sure that you put your footprint in this reality while you're looking around the corner for the next one. Take care. God bless. We'll see you guys tomorrow morning. Bye for now.